Welcome to the Principles of Good Health podcast, where I provide you with straightforward and practical nutrition and lifestyle advice, helping you lead a happier, healthier, and more active life. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, welcome to a fresh episode of the Principles of Good Health. Caroline Peyton, I'm a naturopath and nutritionist, been in practice 15 years, and I specialise in gut health, predominantly helping people with all sorts of symptoms, either directly associated with the gut or often other systemic problems that often come back and very usually come back to a problem in the gut as well. Today, I want to talk about gluten. Gluten is frequently demonized and is hot and high up on the list of the moment you start to experience digestive symptoms. Gluten, often alongside with dairy, are the foods that are taken out of the diet. Your GP will frequently recommend that you exclude gluten, or you might be told to follow a FODMAP's diet, but gluten very much is high up there. You might do that. You may start to find it helps to alleviate things to a degree or not. Things may come back again, symptoms may come back again, or they may not go away altogether. So you start to think that gluten is a problem, gluten is bad. You start to take gluten out of the diet from wheat, you start to take other grains because you start to get a bit confused about whether other grains as well could be a problem. And you start to reduce your overall fibre intake down in that respect. You Google things, you find out that yes, other people are talking about gluten and the relief they have found. But what if I was to tell you that more and more research is pointing to the fact that gluten in and on itself is not actually a major problem for itself? What if I was to tell you that incorporating some gluten grains into your diet, and certainly other grains as well, can be beneficial to your gut? Now, if you're experiencing that the removal of these things is helping things, you're going to think that I'm talking absolute nonsense. But I want to explain and go into this in more detail. We need to go back to basics. We need to start looking at what is really going on in the gut that's leading to the problems in the first place, that starts to create the problem when you start to ingest gluten and potentially other grains as well, these gluten-rich grains. Now, of course, if you've got celiac disease, that is something entirely different. I am not telling you to start to introduce gluten. Absolutely not. That is something different altogether. And certainly in my practice, if you approach me and you have an autoimmune condition, I might be advising to take gluten out of your diet. There has been research, certainly with things like Hashimoto's, thyroid-related autoimmune conditions, where the removal of gluten has been found to be beneficial. But let's go back to basics and let's start to look at what might be going on in the gut, because it's not just about the gluten itself. We've got to start to look at the gut itself, intestinal permeability, intestinal inflammation, digestive capability. Is it not as robust as it should be? That the gut mucosal barrier, is it robust and strong as it should be? And this is where we need to start to look at this. So first of all, what is the quality of the grains that you're eating? Are you buying, or were you buying, a supermarket loaf? Or are you buying some artisanal organic bread that's been made in small batches, that doesn't contain lots of processed emulsifiers and chemicals? Let's just start to think about the organic versus non-organic of the grain. Now, most grains in this country, wheat that you're buying and barley, is going to have been sprayed quite significantly to remove pesticides, and they use herbicide. There's something called glyphosate, which is sprayed. Glyphosate sprayed onto the crops, often before it's harvested, to help the drying process as well, to speed up that harvesting process. There's a lot of concern about glyphosate. In America, I think predominantly it's known as Roundup, that's produced by Monsanto. A lot of concern about that. And EcoWatch, an organization in America, talks about this It's known that farmers use this, certainly in America, right up before harvesting, and definitely in the UK too. And last year, the World Health Organization Cancer Group classified glyphosate as a possible carcinogen, i.e., cancer causing. It's also been noted that this herbicide, there's concerns about it being an endocrine disruptor. So if you're trying to manage your hormones, so whether you are experiencing problems through menopause or a menstruating age, because of it being an endocrine disruptor, you want to be careful. But it's also been noted that it can kill beneficial gut bacteria, which of course we don't want to do. So there's an impact with these chemicals, of course, not just found in wheat and barley and other gluten grains, but the spraying of chemicals on all our crops, vegetables and fruit alike. What is the impact that these chemicals are having in your gut in the first place? Are these leading to inflammation in the gut, weakening that gut barrier, and creating irritation that then makes a problem when you're starting to ingest different types of food? What about the chemicals that are in processed foods, emulsifiers, things like carrageenan that can be found in ice cream, can be found in plant milks, known to be highly inflammatory to the gut, and the microbes do not like it. Then start to consider your fiber intake. Do you realistically achieve 30 grams of fiber every single day? What if I was to tell you that only 4% of the UK adult population achieve 30 grams of fiber a day? Now, we know we need fiber, and it's not just about keeping the bowel movements healthy daily. Of course, we don't want to keep toxicity in the body. We want those bowel movements going through. But that fiber and this diversity of your plant-based and fiber intake is providing the very fuel for your gut microbiome and the beneficial microbes to ferment it. And that fermentation is not only providing compounds that feed other bacteria, but providing compounds that are keeping the gut barrier healthy as well. We have to keep that microbiome in balance so there isn't a dysbiotic picture that's going on. And, we think of our grains to be part of that fiber intake. Are you actively eating different grains like rye, oats, barley, millet, buckwheat, rice, and this sort of pseudo grain like quinoa, not strictly speaking of grain, but providing a really good fiber intake that will actively go towards helping you achieve those 30 grams of fiber a day. We often exclude a lot of these when we start to cut back on grains, thinking they're all bad. And, the picture now is that these are not all bad to be eating. So we need to be eating more of these grains and start to be putting some of these into your diet. Of course, I always say we should be having 10 different plant-based foods a day. Vegetables and fruit, include a bit of grains in that as well, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, to help achieve the diversity that the microbiome needs and to achieve that 30 grams of fiber to keep the bowel healthy and the bowel movements regular as well. Now, what is actually going on in your gut? Do you know? To be frank, you do not know. Even if you've had a colonoscopy, it's not going to give you the information I'm about to tell you that you can find out when you start to do real gold standard microbiome stool testing. So things like a colonoscopy will highlight if there's polyps, if there's a lot of inflammation going on only in certain parts of the gut and in the colon. It will start to identify if there may be something a little bit more sinister going on, like pockets that could be to do with colitis in the gut and, of course, extreme inflammation. But when we start to do gold standard stool testing, metagenomics based, that can identify every single one of the species in your gut. And by looking at those and the research that we know about the microbes, we can start to identify and group and classify these microbes together and start to look at those microbes that are promoting beneficial compounds like butyrate that are feeding different bacteria, helping to keep the gut mucosal healthy, or compounds that are known to be promoting inflammation, that are known to damage that gut mucosal barrier that can make it leaky and weaken, that are known to feed off and degrade this mucosal barrier of the gut lining that helps to keep it robust and healthy. And when we do that, then we can start to see just the likelihood of how much irritation and inflammation is going on. Do you have healthy numbers of microbes, or are you depleted and you're carrying far too many of the unhealthy types of microbes? And we need to bring everything back into balance. I include this stool testing as one of the 4 pillars that we need to look at. 4 pillars of gut health that I include in my practice. So if it isn't gluten, you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm concerned about gluten. I might get some symptoms when I eat gluten, but you're now trying to tell me that perhaps I should put it back into my diet. Where do I start? Well, you need to take a realistic view of your diet. And this isn't just for those thinking about gluten being a problem, but knowing you have other symptoms as well. You need to have a realistic review and an honest look at your diet and ask yourself these questions. Is your diet fiber rich? Is there a diverse plant intake on a daily basis? Is your intake of processed and ultra processed foods very, very low? Is alcohol intake very low, way below your 14 units that supposedly is allowed in your diet? Is your intake very low? Is your sugary food intake very low? Are you focused on a more of a fiber-rich diet, and that your intake of grains are not of the refined versions, unless, of course, you've got some inflammatory bowel disease that you need to be careful with? Is your stress low? And do you take action to calm the stress response when you're about to eat foods? It's so important to do that. When you take an honest and hard look at all those factors, then you can start to think about how you can start to make some changes. But you need to do this very, very slowly. You cannot rush to put more fiber into your diet. You need to take a very, very slow, low and slow review, slowly adding in more fiber into your diet before you start to look potentially at those gluten grains. Little by little. You need a lot of patience to do this, but it is possible. We need to start to calm the gut down by making these small, steady changes. And so that you can start to rebalance the gut microbiome. But as I said, it does take time, and putting the grains in isn't going to be, and certainly the gluten grains is not going to be first and foremost on your list. Now, it needs patience, but it is possible. But if you're not sure where to start, do reach out to me, because I can help you make those changes, making it very, very personalized. Yes, we can review and look at the stool testing, which is absolutely brilliant. And I understand the markers and the findings, and therefore what action needs to be taken and how to take that action. But these days, it really, really is now focused on food first. Yes, there are things that we can do from a herbal point of view to calm the gut down, but we need to take those steps to get the right fiber into your diet, but making those steps slow and steady. I hope you found this really helpful. And as I said, do reach out to me. PeytonPrinciples.com is my website. Caroline at PeytonPrinciples.com is my email address. Please do reach out so we can explore options for you. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you for listening. This is Caroline, the creator of the Peyton Principles Natural Health podcast series. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please click like and subscribe to the entire podcast series.